Welcome everybody to the Single Digit Body Fat Series. I am Mark Smelly and I want to talk to you today about the war on carbs. It's going to be helpful if we have carbohydrates to help hydrate those tissues and to help those tissues to heal and repair. I'm going to eat carbohydrates probably 3 to 4 times a week. It's easy to go low carb. It's easy just to get entrees. It's easy just to eat like salad and meat. I'm using carbs as a supplement. I'm using carbs as kind of like a secret weapon. Welcome to the Single Digit Body Fat Series.
Strength is never weakness, weakness is never strength.
Figure out a way to just be less fat. And you know what that means. What in the will happen if I go all in on this? Today I'm going to tell you how to get ridiculously shredded. Welcome everybody to the Single Digit Body Fat Series. I am Mark Smelly and I want to talk to you today about the war on carbs. And more specifically, I want to talk to you about carbs in general. I'm changing my mind. I'm changing things up. I'm shifting gears. Maybe not forever, but I've been implementing a little bit of carbs recently. And it's not because the ketogenic diet, it's not because it wasn't working. It's just because I am curious and I want to see if there's more. Is there more that I can get out of my running? Is there more that I can get out of my lifting? And so I want to actually start to incorporate some carbohydrates into the workout. And what I did is I sought the help of John Heck, who was recently on my podcast, who formerly learned most of his nutritional stuff from me. He learned it from the book, The War on Carbs. But for those of you that have read the book, The War on Carbs, I think what sometimes gets lost in the message and what even gets lost in the book is that there was a third phase to the war on carbs. And the third phase to the war on carbs was the performance enhancing diet. And the performance enhancing diet was a protocol that allowed you to have some carbohydrates here and there because you can eat carbohydrates and you can be keto. There are a lot of people that do that. There's a lot of people that have specific days where they'll mainly have fats and proteins, and they'll have other days where maybe they have a little bit more carbohydrate. What John Heck likes to do is he has kind of what he calls high, low, and medium days. So he's kind of a carb monster at the moment, and he's doing a lot of bodybuilding. And so that kind of makes sense because in those bodybuilding workouts, you're trying to get nourishment. You're trying to get like a pump, and you're trying to create a certain amount of fatigue in those muscles. And once that fatigue is achieved, pretty much from there, it's all about recovery. And so how are you going to recover? You're going to recover with your sleep, and you're going to recover with hydration and saturation of the muscle tissues. And how do we get sodium and magnesium, and how do we get all these things kind of into the muscle cells? It's going to be helpful if we have carbohydrates to help hydrate those tissues and to help those tissues to heal and repair. Remember, we had Andy Galpin on Mark Bell's Power Project in the past. And I remember saying to Andy Galpin, I was like, oh, it's kind of funny because like you train legs, then you eat a bunch of carbs, and it's almost as if the carbs go right to your legs. And he goes, no, it is as if the carbs go right to your legs. That is what happens. So whatever body part is trained. So just imagine how we can kind of sparse this out now that I'm talking about it this way. What if you had a weak body part and you want to try to bring up that weak body part? Maybe that's a day where the night before or the day of, there's a little bit more carbohydrate, so your workout could be more powerful, or maybe there's even more carbohydrate pre and post. It's kind of hard to tell exactly where to put them, but it's important that we play around with these things. And what I want to share with you guys right now is that I'm in constant search of things that are better. I like to take former ideas, put them here, and I like to take a current idea and put it here, try the current idea out, and if the current idea starts to rise up to the previous belief, then that's going to be the one that is going to topple the previous belief, and then I have to have changed my mind at that point. I have to now understand that the previous idea that I had or belief that I had wasn't fake, it wasn't false, it wasn't that it was worthless, it's just that I found something that might be working better. The key to all that is you may have found something that's working better at the time, at the moment. And that's why I think it's important to switch and to change up and to try new things. Even for you as a consumer, it's not good for me to be locked into a fasting paradigm. It's not good for me to be locked into low carb. It's not good for me to be locked into keto. because then you don't ever get a chance to learn, grow, or expand if you're mainly listening to me. Hopefully you're not. Hopefully you're listening to other people. But Louis Simmons said it best when he said, hey, you read one book all your life and that's probably the only thing you'll ever know. It's that one thing from that one book if you just grew up on an island kind of by yourself, right? So you want to expand beyond these other things. Imagine if I never quit powerlifting. Imagine if I was powerlifting forever. I would say that if I continued powerlifting, especially if I continued to like be in love with powerlifting, and if I continued powerlifting, I'd probably be dead. I mean, my blood pressure was high. I was 330 pounds. My blood sugar situation wasn't getting any better. I wasn't necessarily diabetic, but was starting to have some signs of like pre-diabetes, and I was heavy, and I was not evaluating my life. I just wanted to lift heavier and heavier. I was stuck in that paradigm of just powerlifting. So if I only powerlifted, I wouldn't even be here anymore to share some of this information with you. And even if I was still here to share this information with you, I'd still just be talking about how you need to do heavy ass good mornings to overcome your shitty squat. And we just wouldn't be anywhere. But it's important to explore, and hopefully you guys understand that I am somebody that is going to continue to try to share a lot of different information, even if it's unconventional. I'll go as far as to say, as most of the other content that I see out there is still baby talk. People talking about macronutrients and micronutrients, people talking about apps, tracking your calories, and so forth. And I just still don't hear enough talk about just lifestyle behaviors and sunlight, cold exposure, and all these different things that I believe personally in the long run, and I could be wrong because I've been wrong before. And I've got to take my old ideas and stack the new ideas up next to it, and whichever idea wins is the idea that is better. But I am really a believer in the sunlight. I am a believer that when you start to get more and more light from the sun, that it makes your decisions easier, almost like your sleep, right? We can all get on board with that idea of sleep. If we sleep 8 hours, 9 hours, or we have good quality sleep every night, I think a lot of us can get into agreement and we can understand that our decision-making skills for the day are going to be easier. So as it pertains to your circadian rhythm, and as it pertains to getting sunlight and getting some magnetism and doing some grounding and getting some cold exposure and not just being stuck on your phone and these things, we could start to say, well, if I have a nice relationship with that, if I have a healthy relationship with that, I get a couple hours of sun every day, I get at least 15 minutes of grounding every day, and I'm doing these things pretty much day in and day out, and every once in a while you'll mess up or fail or whatever, but you're doing a lot of it, it's going to make everything else less stressful. Less stressful. It's going to make everything easier. It's going to make your breathing easier. It's going to make your sleep easier. It's going to make your bowel movements easier. Literally, it'll make your bowel movements easier. Your T cells, a lot of your digestion, and a lot of your immune system is just right behind here. So anytime you get sunlight on the stomach, it could be a really good positive thing for your digestive system, for your immune system, and so on. And so those are all really powerful tools, because if you have a better immune system, you're going to stay healthier for longer. And when you're healthier for longer, it's easier to make the same decision every day. Think about on a day where you're sick. How bad are you dying to go on a run when you're sick, when you're throwing up, and when you have diarrhea? Like, how excited are you to go hit the gym and do your squats, right? You're not excited at all. You just are wishing that you felt better and felt healthier. Back to the carbohydrates. I just want you guys to understand some of that in context of, I'm not saying that I'm jumping ship. I'm not saying that I'm like now, off keto and stuff. I'm still gonna be pricking my finger. I'm still gonna be making sure I am in ketosis, that I have 0.3 millimolars via the Keto Mojo app or Keto Mojo device I use when I prick my finger at home. I probably won't be at 0.3 all the time, but I'll be in ketosis many days. Probably be about 3 days a week where I'm eating carbohydrates. Yesterday was a day where I chose not to eat them. Today is a day where I chose to eat some before I did my 400-meter sprints today. I wanted to see how it felt, so I had some rice and grinds this morning, about 110 with 100, maybe 140, 150 grams of carbohydrates this morning, just to kind of see what it did. Felt good. I can't really say yet that it felt a lot different than before, but I did have some concern. My rest periods were shorter, so that's a little different. My rest periods were a little shorter, but I did have some concern that I was going to get like a pump. I was like, oh no, I think here comes a bodybuilder pump in my legs. Luckily, that didn't happen. I was able to clear out the lactate or clear out whatever was coming in there, and that didn't happen. But I was, for a second there, I was like, man, this is getting to be close to feeling like German volume training. But anyway, that went really good. And you know, to be honest, you guys have seen me do a lot of these different styles of diet and different styles of nutrition over the years. And if we're being very honest with most of the people that we see do keto, most of the people that we see do carnivore, a lot of times they tend to look a little flat. A lot of times the physique isn't maybe as sharp as the guy that just eats a couple 100 grams of carbohydrates here and there. And so when we had John Hack on the podcast, he made me think to myself, you know what, dude, like you're there already. Like, because I was so fat before, I don't really understand or realize that I'm pretty lean now. And because of how lean I am now, I'm like, well, it just makes sense to add in carbohydrates. Whereas before, the carbohydrates were a trigger. Now let's talk specifically a little bit more about carbohydrates and the responsibility. So when you're eating no carbs, there's a responsibility of eating proteins and fats, and the responsibility is to not eat carbohydrate. And it is to try to keep your fats, you know, moderate, and maybe even we would say like high to some degree. And when you're in the single digit body fat and you're really trying to lean out, we actually want to bring the fat low here and there, maybe for a couple days in a row, so that we can continue to get leaner and leaner, and we can protein leverage and get shredded. I've done many videos on it now for this series. The responsibility you have when you're eating carbohydrates, though, is really kind of screwed. It really makes it tough. So when I'm traveling, I have kind of a bunch of traveling coming up. This weekend I'm going to LA. The next weekend I'm going to St. Kitts with my wife, which is an area in the Caribbean. Really excited about that. And then there's like a bunch of other trips. And anyway, on all those trips, I will probably choose to go very low carb, because it's easy to go low carb. It's easy just to get entrees. It's easy just to eat like salad and meat. It's easy even in the airport to find, you know, pepperoni, salami, cheese, hard-boiled eggs. Like, it's just easy. For me, it's easy. I've been doing it forever, and it's easier for me to make my meat bags with the carnivore crisps and all that stuff. It's not hard for me to do that when I'm traveling. But yeah, the real trick when you start to add carbohydrates in is we got to keep the fats low. What I'm thinking is, like, on some of these days where I'm eating more and more carbohydrate, for me to stay lean and stay in good shape and to be in the shape that I want to be in, and to have the carbs kind of fill up my muscles and make me feel good, I want to make sure that just because I'm consuming a lot of carbohydrate, I want to make sure I'm not in this like crazy caloric surplus. So this is where things get really tricky. Like, we don't know when somebody is like, man, I feel amazing, I switched to a carnivore diet. We don't really know what that is. We don't know why that is. We don't know if that's just because they're no longer eating carbs. Maybe they would have felt that way anyway if they just got rid of some carbs. Maybe that would help get rid of some bloat. Maybe that would help clear out the mind. Or also it could be this. They could actually, for the first time in their lives, be in like a caloric surplus, which is interesting because maybe they're not for the first time in their lives in a caloric surplus, but maybe they're in a caloric surplus in a sense of like they're getting the nutrients their body needs, which is fats and protein. Remember, I've said before, we don't really need a lot of carbohydrates. There's not a need for dietary carbohydrates, even fiber. There's a very, very specific need for fats and proteins. And so when someone switches to a carnivore diet or keto diet, first of all, we have the honeymoon period, which lasts about 6 weeks, right? And in addition to that, we also have somebody just switching diets. So we don't really know why someone feels good from some of their diets. The same thing can be said about some of these guys that they just love carbs and they are always talking about what great workouts they have. Maybe it's the carbs, or maybe it's just a caloric surplus, right? It could be a little bit of both. And maybe when people have tried keto before, some of the people that maybe haven't had success with keto or don't like it, maybe they've been in a caloric deficit and they don't like it. So it's really interesting, you know, and for me, I guess I could be guilty of sort of something along those lines. Is like whenever I tracked calories, anytime I ever tracked calories in my life, I tracked them to be in a caloric deficit. And then I was like, this is dumb. I don't like doing this. And so I decided not to really ever do it again. And yeah, I mean, I guess never say never. I should explore that too. I have explored it in the past. It has been something that has both worked for me and something that hasn't worked well for me. I find it to be annoying. I find it to be like extra steps, but some people, they like to keep track of those, things, and it's helpful to them. Like whatever is helpful for you to get in the shape that you want to get into is important. Anyway, back to the matter at hand, and we're talking about carb cycling. So what I'm going to do, and I'll make a few suggestions, I'm going to eat carbohydrates probably 3 to 4 times a week for the next couple weeks, just to see how I respond. I'm expecting that I'll get a little bit of cellular bloat, maybe a little bit. I sort of feel that way now. I am like a little heavier than I have been, but actually what I'm hoping for is I'm hoping that my highs are higher and I hope my lows are lower because of the manipulation of the carbohydrates. You know, again, my goal is to get down, you know, under 210 pounds or so. I was 217 this morning, and the body weight stuff's going great, but I still really need to be like 212, 210. I think for me to get the results I want on the track, if I'm just 200 pounds or 205, it's just going to be way, way easier. It's not like it's going to happen overnight, but it will make everything way easier. And in combination with how much stronger I'm getting via doing my sprints, which is also interesting. Like I'm way stronger now than I've ever been, which sounds weird, but like in terms of like fighting or in terms of like being able to defend myself or just being able to fuck somebody up, I feel a lot better. And that could be a false sense, but I feel stronger than I've ever felt in my life. And I'm certainly not stronger on a squat, bench, or deadlift, not stronger on any of those lifts. But my metrics for it is lifting some of these sandbags and the speed now that I can get myself going out, and my fitness level. Like my fitness level is getting a lot better too. So that's helping me feel very confident. But some of my hopes in what I'm doing with these this manipulation of adding in some carbohydrates is I'm using carbs as a supplement. I'm using carbs as kind of like a secret weapon. And when you start to when you get yourself lean, when you get yourself in shape, and you start to really sensitize yourself to having the ability to utilize fats and utilize carbs and utilize protein really well, then you earn the right to be able to throw in a little bit more carbohydrate. And I'm not saying that anyone out there, like, oh, first you got to get, super lean before you ever touch carbs. I don't believe that to be true. However, I just think it's helpful. And I think that that's one of the goals of bodybuilding. And bodybuilders do this really well. They build up, then they cut. They build up, and cut, and they go back and forth. And part of the reason for that is to continually recomp. And when they recomp, they reestablish their macronutrients. They reestablish how many calories they need every single time. So their calories over time for a good bodybuilder, take someone like Nsima, who maybe at like 16, 17 was maybe 210, something like that. I've seen old pictures of him, probably two something, low twos, and now he's like 250. So his calories per day are so significantly different nowadays, not only because he has more muscle mass, but also because he's engaged in jiu-jitsu. And Nsima is somebody who will titrate some carbohydrates in there, here and there. But what I'm really looking for is just some performance enhancement out of this, and I think it's going to really help. So far, so good, but it's way too early for me to really give you the full scoop on how it's benefiting me. But in the book, The War on Carbs, which I wrote 9,000 million years ago, I did talk about adding in some carbohydrate. And the way that I like to do that is either a couple times a week or one time a week, have a good like carb reset. Can we get into the cheat meal stuff and all that kind of stuff? We can, and I think that there's a spot for it, and the spot for it would be on the day where you're carbing up. But again, I would just be careful of those fats. I'd be careful that you don't just, that it just does, there's got to be a governor put on this thing. There's got to be some sort of governor on this thing. So if you could on your high carb day, maybe say like, hey, I'm not going to go over like 80 or 100 grams of fat for the day. That would be pretty nice. That will allow you to have some pizza. That will allow you to maybe have a little bit of ice cream. But you might tend to want to go with the frozen yogurt because it has less fat and because you can spend your fats in a different spot. You can spend them on some pizza or spend them somewhere else. But you do have to be very careful and very cautious that this doesn't turn into a binge. If it turns into a binge, then it's not for you. That's as simple as that. If it turns into like a healthy binge and you're smashing some rice and stuff, I don't see any issues with that. So there's two different main ways of doing it. You can go 300 to 400 grams of carbs spread throughout a couple different days a week, or you can just go with one big banger of just trying to really replenish your glycogen stores on one day and doing 300-400 grams of carbohydrates. If you just go way back, not to some of my original dieting, which was like a keto diet / Dan Duchaine protocol, which was every 7 days or every other week or so, I would carb up. And he had maltodextrin in there along with like rice, potatoes, and some other things that he thought were a good idea to, and then he had a little bit of room for cheat, if I remember correctly. But after that, when I moved to LA, and Big Will Harris put me on a diet. Will's recommendation was keto, and then every third day bring in a little bit of carbohydrate. And that's the way a lot of bodybuilders were doing things years and years ago. Before the dietary keto, before the fats were just like way through the roof, it was more like low carb and then a high carb day. And the meats are always lean. Like bodybuilders, they always eat lean meat. So one thing to keep in mind if you are going to try some of these recommendations is even on your lower carb days, I would say let's not go crazy with the fats, because our calories for the week are still going to matter, and our calories for the week can still get out of hand. So on those days, just have some sort of governor on these things, have some sort of measure, have some sort of number in your head. For me, I'm mainly trying to have like 2 lean sources of protein on a day where I don't fast, and then maybe a fattier source somewhere else. So like I might have scrambled eggs and some cheese and some bacon as one meal. And the next 2 meals could be Piedmontese beef. By the way, I don't know what you guys think of this bird flu thing, but it's a great opportunity to double down on your Piedmontese beef rather than eating these birds that are like getting vaccinated or whatever the hell else they're doing with them. I don't have all the details yet, but as I find out more information, I'll try to share that with you guys, because I don't want to see anybody getting sick and hurt and so on, or potentially having just lower immunity and being more susceptible to things. But for now, I ditched chicken, and the only eggs I eat are from the eggs that I have at my house, from the chickens that are that are right in my own yard. I think that pretty much concludes it. But yeah, just make sure that your carbohydrates and fats aren't really blended together much. As I've mentioned many times in the past, carbohydrates and fats are not really found in nature, except for in milk. And more often than not, you're going to find protein and fats together. And so on your low carb days, you're going to primarily be hammering a lot of protein. Your protein can stay the same if you want. You can kind of leave it at whatever your body weight is in grams of protein per day. Your carbohydrates, on like a day when you're trying to replenish, maybe go 1 gram per pound on that too. You could go higher. You can manipulate that a little bit, but just try, You know, if you're 200 pounds, try 200 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbohydrates, and maybe about 100 grams of fat in a particular day. Something along those lines should get you to land on the number correctly. And if you're trying to really stay lean for a particular day, or trying to do what Nsima recently called on our podcast, he called it a dig. If you're trying to dig down deep, and we'll do some more episodes on this as well, if you're trying to dig down deep and get really lean, then maybe just keep those fats to half maybe keep your fats down to like 50 grams, somewhere in there. For myself personally, I'll make it really simple for you. I have found that when my fats are right around 50 or 60, that's when I tend to lean out, regardless of whether I'm eating carbs or whether I'm not eating carbs. In the absence of carbs, though, there's just an absence of a little bit of extra calories when I have my fats that low, because then the only other source of calories is from protein, which, as I've told you guys before, I don't really believe that protein is even much of a calorie at all. Don't go away, because I got to give you guys a list of carbohydrates, because people are going to say, what kind of carbs? Most of them should be natty, healthy carbs. I would say let's go with rice. Let's go with potatoes, sweet potatoes. I personally love a Japanese sweet potato. Those are delicious. Rice and Grinds is a product that I like to use, which is basically a rice cereal. That's super convenient. Honey, fruit. But I would say, like, let's go with the more complex carbohydrates mostly. The fruit and the honey, have at it. You know, don't be scared to eat those. But I would mainly leave those more complex carbohydrates as kind of the main source. There are other things that you can eat. I mean, we can get into having some processed food. You can have a little bit of cereal. Cereal is extremely low fat and usually very high carbohydrate. I think it's always a decent idea to pay attention to your sugar. Although, you know, when I've done stuff like this before in the past, I've had like Cocoa Pebbles and things like that. Again, it just gets to be really easy to overeat, because how many Cocoa Pebbles you're just not going to be able to eat that many of them. Like you're going to want to eat the whole box, right? And we're not really allowed to eat the whole box. So therefore, it might not be a good idea to even bother buying some Cocoa Pebbles. You might want to try a cereal that is like Rice Chex or something like that. You want to try something that has way less sugar, so it's way less palatable, so you don't end up like overeating it, but it will still be delicious. Like I'll mix something like that with a protein powder. I'll take like This Is the Way vanilla or This Is the Way chocolate, dump that in there, throw some honey in there, and that could be a really wonderful pre or post-workout meal. So you got some decent options in terms of the carbohydrates. There is room, you know, there's room for like a little bit of candy and stuff. It just depends on how many carbohydrates you start to allow yourself. For some of you out there that are maybe leaner, for some of you out there that have maybe a little bit more muscle or looking for a bulk, I wouldn't really be afraid of candy. Like the hard candies and stuff like that, the Skittles, the Starbursts, the things that just have very, very low fat. Again, these things are shitty for us in the long run. They're not great for like our teeth. They're not great for so many different things. But it is kind of nice to have that like little bolus of sugar sometimes before or after a workout to help you replenish. And I almost forgot intra-workout. So the intra-workout carbs are like, now we're taking advantage of one of the most powerful hormones in the body, and that's insulin. So having some carbohydrate during your workout can be amazing. Just look into some different cyclic dextrins. They're called highly branched cyclic dextrins is what they're called. Those are some of the ones that mix the easiest. There's some companies that have really awesome flavored ones and things. They actually they taste really good. The thing that's important to know about those types of intra-workout carbohydrates is you don't need a lot to have a huge impact. Anywhere between, for most of you listening, anywhere between 30 to like 50 or 60 grams of that should do a ton for you. And what you're gonna notice with those intra-workout carbs is just little sips of it here and there during your workout. You're gonna almost feel like you're gonna feel as if you're not gonna feel fatigued as easy, and you're gonna feel as if it's like the beginning of your workout. Like you'll have more legs, especially if there's a little bit of electrolyte and stuff like that in there as well. That's where I found the huge payoff, because you're drinking liquid during your workout, but the liquid is actually going somewhere. It's getting digested so quickly that those carbohydrates are hitting your bloodstream, as well as the sodium, potassium, and whatever the hell else you have in your intra-workout shake. Whatever else you have in there is actually saturating the muscle tissue. So there you go. There's the types of carbohydrates that you can have on this carb cycling protocol. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength. Catch you guys later. Hi-ya!